It's 5:30, and I welcome everybody to the June 17th meeting of the Saugeen Shores Committee of Adjustment, and I welcome them. And at this point, I call this meeting to order. The second item on the agenda is the acknowledgement of any pecuniary interest. I remind members that you can raise it now or at the time of the agenda. Mr. Reid.
Pecuniary interest.
I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Matheson and seconded by Ms. Kuntz, stated today, June the 17th, that we adopt the minutes of the May 21st meeting as circulated. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Reid, if you leave the chamber, please. There's no additional minutes or business that we have. We have a public hearing. Thank you. We have a public hearing now of item number 5.1. This is a minor variance, A-34-19.44 for Mr. Nick Getz with the municipal address of 154 Concession 10 in the former township of Saugeen. Ms. Fortier.
Thank you. The property, it's just down the road from us here, so I believe you're probably mostly familiar with it. So it's just off of Concession 10. Doesn't work. And just on the edge of the settlement area, but it is actually part of the agricultural lands in Bruce County. So we've got the aerial view there, so you can see it's largely treed. There is a building now on the property, kind of in this general location here. And you can see here it is agricultural under the Bruce County official plan and the zoning. So the proposed use is for a home industry, which can be defined as a contractor's yard. The surrounding uses are commercial, residential, and agricultural. So you can see there's some commercial and residential uses here, as well as some commercial uses in the purple. This servicing, they do have access to municipal water, but not municipal sewer, so it would be developed on private septic. And the access is from Concession 10, which is a year-round municipal road. So in terms of the proposal is to permit a home industry to be established on the property before the dwelling has been constructed. And to do so, a number of provisions require relief from Section 3.1, which provides policies for home industries under the bylaw. So we've got the site plan here. So the entryway, and then this is the existing building on the property, which can be defined as an implement shed. That's what the building permit was for. And then the proposed house is kind of at the rear of the property, and the proposed septic bed, but these two structures have not been constructed. So the variance would require relief from the provision that states that home industries may only be permitted as secondary to a residence. So in this case, it would be permitted in absence of a home. It would increase the permitted floor area for a home industry. So the bylaw allows home industries to be up to 100 square meters. This one is just about 560 square meters, I believe. Yes, 560 square meters. And to allow the home industry that's not clearly secondary to a residential use on the property, as the residential use has not yet been established. So that's the picture of the building as existing today. In terms of the policies, the provincial policy statement provides direction for development in agricultural areas. It sets out permitted uses in prime agricultural areas, such as this one. Further direction on uses in prime agricultural areas is provided by OMAFRA's guidelines. And generally, uses such as a contractor's yard, which this can be defined as currently, is not to be permitted in a prime agricultural area, as they are not considered to be agricultural related. However, home industries are permitted in prime agricultural areas under the guidelines. And so in this case, this use could be considered under the parameters of a home industry. At this point, I don't believe it's possible to assess the use as a home industry in absence of a home. So I don't believe it's consistent with the PPS. In terms of the county official plan, it's similar in that they have been identified as prime ag due to the quality of the soils as well as other factors, and a contractor's yard is not a permitted use under the county plan. Home industries, however, are permitted. So the proposal does not meet the definition of a home industry at this time until a dwelling is constructed on the property. So at this time, I don't believe that the proposal conforms to the official plan. In terms of the zoning, it is zoned agricultural in the Saugeen Shores zoning bylaw, and a home industry is a permitted use in the agricultural zone. A contractor's yard is not. As mentioned, it does not meet the definition of a home industry under the bylaw. So home industry is an industry that is secondary to a residential use on the property that is, and the residence is occupied by the proprietor of that home industry. So at this point, it's not possible to basically define it as such. That's where we are for the zoning. In terms of the floor area, I've mentioned that it exceeds what's permitted under the bylaw. So at this time, I can't say if the proposal meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. There were some comments received from the circulated agencies and town staff. So town staff provided quite detailed comments, which I won't read out in full. They're provided in the report for your review. I will just say that in general, town staff support the application and have indicated that the owner should enter into an agreement with the town for the construction of a dwelling. In terms of the SPCA, they didn't raise any major concerns and found it to be acceptable. Just in terms of planning staff's response to town comments, we don't disagree that there are many of the towns, with many of the comments raised by the town staff, there are merits to the proposal. However, it is our opinion that without an existing home on the property, the application does not meet the general intent of the agricultural policies of the county plan or the town zoning bylaw. The use proposed can only be defined as a contractor's yard at this time and is not a permitted use under these policies. We also note that the Planning Act requires all decisions affecting planning matters to be consistent with the PPS, and at this time we do not feel that it is. We didn't receive any public comments in regards to this application, so there may be some tonight to consider, but we haven't received any formal at this time. And so in terms of the 4 tests, I've kind of gone over the first 2, which are the official plan and the zoning bylaw, and I don't believe it currently conforms. In terms of is the variance desirable and appropriate? While the lands are within an agricultural area, it is true that the lot is too small to support general agricultural uses. The minimum lot size set out in the county plan for agriculture is generally 40 hectares, and this lot is approximately 3 hectares. So on these small lots in agricultural areas, residential and residential associated uses are generally acceptable under provincial and county policies, home industries being one such example. However, non-residential uses, such as a contractor's yard on an agricultural property, are generally not permitted under any of our policies and are required to locate on either lower quality rural lands or within settlement areas. It's only within exceptional circumstances that non-agricultural uses, such as a contractor's yard, are permitted to be located in agricultural areas. And planning staff do not feel that the proposal meets those standards set out by OMAFRA. Therefore, the use can really only be permitted under the umbrella of a home industry. And so while the owner may enter into an agreement with the town to construct the dwelling, we feel it's more appropriate to defer the decision until a dwelling is at least under construction on the property and the application can be appropriately assessed as a home industry. This would ensure that a contractor's yard is not established as a permitted use on the property in absence of a home. The variance, I don't believe currently would be an appropriate form of development. In terms of is the variance minor, in this test I do believe that it would meet it. In terms of the lot size or the size of the proposed use, It's largely in a residential area. The size of the building isn't out of place. There are similar sized barns and other such buildings in the area. So I don't think the footprint from 100 to 550 represents a major change in impact. The building already exists, so there is already an existing impact. And the home industry proposed largely operates off-site, so the size of the home industry in this case won't lead to any increase in terms of production, emissions, noise, or other impacts that wouldn't exist with a smaller footprint. So in that respect, I don't think that the variance will have a major impact on the character or the ability of adjacent property owners to use their properties for permitted uses or municipal functions. So in that regard, it is minor, but I don't feel it meets the intent of any of our policies. So with that, I do believe that we should recommend a deferral on this application until a dwelling is under construction and can be properly evaluated as a home industry.
Thank you, Ms. Forte. Does the applicant wish to address the committee? Mr. Guest, do you wish to address us? Do you wish to address the committee, sir? Okay. Sir, would you please come up to the microphone? Thank you, sir. Any members of the public that wish to address? Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Thank you for listening to me. My name is Ken Martin. I currently own the farm that's located beside it. 152 is the fire lot. You'll see it as the original parcel of the 100-acre land that the drive-in theater, which was the land we're talking about, was taken off of that, along with 2.5 acres in the front of that. That was also part of my wife's family. I'd like to go through this on a step-by-step basis to show you some of the concerns that I have with the proposal that is before you this evening. I will just go from what I see from what I've taken out of the bylaws. It's not in an order of significance by any way, shape, or mean. We go down the first thing where accessory uses are permitted in section 3.1.1. One of the very first things that it says that it's not allowed to be an accessory building or structure is a shipping container. There's currently a shipping container located on the property with a concrete pad that has been poured underneath it, and it's residing on that. So I don't know whether that can be considered a temporary shipping container, but it sure looks pretty permanent to me. When you have a home industry, as according to bylaw 3.1.5, no part of an accessory structure shall be located in front of any portion of the main building or structure. If you look at this, at the layout of the land, the building that they put up is going to be in front of the house. So it's going to be the primary thing that you see from the road, which is contrary to exactly what the bylaw is saying. The other thing that I'm doing when you go to 3.1.1 is your home industry. It's quite convenient that it seems that the word contractor's yard is used as a home industry. I do not believe it is allowed in the home industry. In the home industry, it's called a contractor's shop. A contractor's yard is a different animal. A contractor's yard cannot be part of a home industry, which is clearly laid out in the other documents that were set to the agenda of this meeting. It's quite obviously that a home industry shall only be located where part of a dwelling It's only part of it, and there's no single dwelling in existence on that. That's 3.11B. The total gross floor area of the home industry does not exceed 100 square meters. All of a sudden, there's a farm implement building already constructed that is well above the 100 square meters. It is 560 square meters that has been built prior to the house or prior to anything else going on. Section E, change the residential or agricultural character of the area. There is 2 pits that have been in existence on the 10th. As you go up the hill, there's Walsh's pit on the left. There's Miller's concrete plant on the right. Both of them are surrounded by berms, and both of them are stepped back from the highway to not to interrupt with people's livelihood or people's houses, because there's houses on that road right there. Where this location is going to be, there's no berms around it. There will be work done there. I was out there yesterday doing some work on my farm, and I got shook about 3 or 4 times by loud banging noises and stuff that emanated from that property. I'd also like to make mention that you just had a severance request, and the 100-acre lot that is directly across the road, I think, is going to be a Barry's Construction subdivision of some 300 homes that is going in there. There is a berm area and a strip right along next to where the Miller's Construction is that would insulate those houses from the noise that could be possibly coming up from there. There shall be no product on Section F. There shall be no product on display except within the building. Tonight you can drive by, and on the rail trail portion where it borders the rail trail, if you look down there, you'll see that there's a bunch of area that's been cleared off underneath the existing power lines, which brought up another thought to my mind. If we allow a, as they want to call it now, a contractor's yard, and it only can be a contractor's shop, a contractor's yard, I'm quite sure that Ontario Hydro would be interested in knowing limits of approach to a 340, to a large line that's traveling down the backside of that property. And it has not been noted on the diagram that this area has been cleared out. G, you're only supposed to have 3 commercial vehicles allowed on the building if it's a home industry. Currently, there's 2 large dump trucks out there. There's a large tandem trailer that has a backhoe on it. There's a Bobcat there. And at the other location of the individual, he has a 350 truck plus a large contractor's van that's going to, or trailer, the contractor's trailer, that's going to be put onto this lot. You can sure guarantee that because they're all splattered with Great Lakes concrete all over them. Today, when I went over to looked from my property onto his property, there's Section I talks about storage of hazardous waste. In front of that sea container that I was talking about, there is now a gas tank of some size, 250 gallons to 500, something like that, that's been put out there. As I said earlier, there's that new area that's going to be cleared out for outside storage of goods, and there shall be no outside storage of goods in the home industry. Can't be visual from the adjacent land. The trees that he put on that nice little diagram up there that showed that they were kind of protecting us from being able to see the building and stuff like that are not on his land. I actually know the individual that planted those trees. So those trees are not on his land, if that makes any difference. There's only supposed to be 2 additional parking spots. The additional parking specifically used by a dwelling lot, not more than 2 additional parking spaces shall be assigned. So we got the 3, we've already got 3 or 4 different trucks and trailers that are going to be put on that building, on that land. Another one of the points that I'd like to make is that even on his diagram, when he said that the driveway was going to be 40 feet wide, the maximum width on the bylaw of 3.24.7 is 33 feet or 10 meters. When you go to the proposing bylaw, which is another one of the documents that you had in your package, the use can be considered a yard under the bylaw. So this is they've already said that it's tried to be used as under the bylaw as a contractor's yard, and that's not permitted. That's on page 5 of the document that was attached to the minutes. I'll be using this document for the next little bit. I think it was the summary. It's quite convenient that it was an implement shed that was for agricultural uses that was put up on this piece of land, and it doesn't take an awful lot of my personal opinion to see that this was actually put up to be a contractor's shed or a contractor's yard so that he could store working equipment to do concrete work. Let's the Omar Afa, whatever that means. Said, generally uses as a contractor yards are not permitted in prime agricultural area, and that's what this has been described as. And as already been noted, the home industries are generally permitted when there's a house there. There's no house there at all. There's a little bit of a driveway that's been put in there. Contractor's yard is not a permitted use, as I'm reading out of the county's official plan review. As noted, the proposal does not meet the definition of a home industry. The proposal does not conform to the official plan. And let's make it quite clear that the zoning bylaw on page 9 says, a home industry is a permitted use in the agricultural zone. A contractor's yard is not. And I believe what we're looking at is a contractor's yard. Now, I don't know whether this is really our issue or not, but the town of Saugeen Shores made a comment that the proposal facilitates the removal of a disruptive business from a residential neighborhood to a location with minimal impacts and proximity to other uses which have similar negative impacts on residential uses. So I think there's already some sort of a home industry somewhere else in town that the town feels it's better to stick it out in the 10th across from a new subdivision that's going to be built in the next 2 years, a kitty corner from a current residential house, abutting to a residential house, and there is a residential house on the farm that we own. I do not believe that it's a minor variance. I believe this is a big variance that is going because you're going to have to put a contractor's yard out there, and that's a lot of red tape that you'll have to go through to get that. The one other thing I'm worried about is that that land is very low. It's not very high. The water table is extremely high out there. That's actually the work I was doing, trying to get some ditches to drain some water out of there. There's a proposal for a single septic bed out there. This, I think the original proposal that we're going through for right now is to get the washrooms established for the building that was built, the industrial agricultural building that was built there. And then there's going to be a requirement to have a second sewage, I forgot the words right, sorry, but a second one that's going to be attached to the house. But that all has to be built up because the house that's in front of it was built up by 6-7 feet, and where I put in I had to build the land up. I want to make sure that happens. And the planning staff says the use as proposed can only be defined as a contractor's yard, and that's exactly what I believe it is too. Now, the other things that I want to just make sure that we got, I've gone through the list of the vehicles that are going to be there. I've talked to you about the septic. I've talked to you about the width of the driveway that's already been in contravention. Just a piece of what happened already. The drainage ditch that goes along the front of there, the spring was, the owner of the property decided he didn't need a culvert in front of there, so he took the culvert out of there. The town had to come back and put a culvert in there. That culvert has worked well for many years because I've been involved with the land that's upstream of that for many years, and he just went away and did what he wanted to do. He's established a sea can on top of on top of a concrete pad. He built a building before he had proper authority to do it, in full intention of having it as a contractor's yard. And without further ado, gentlemen and ladies, that was pretty well the areas of concern that I have with the proposed adjustment.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the committee? Not, then we'll turn over to the committee. Any questions of the committee? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for staff, I guess for Tessa. One of the comments that you put down is that planning staff do not feel there are sufficient means to require the construction of a home on this property. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Well, the owner could enter into an agreement potentially with the town, but, you know, I don't have the legal knowledge to say how enforceable those might be. You know, if for some reason the house isn't constructed, you know, what sort of means does the town have to demolish the building, various things like, so it just, with recommending deferral, you know, I didn't get a lawyer's opinion or anything about that, about, you know, what would be an enforceable kind of agreement in this case, but just because I was going to be recommending deferral, and it just seemed to make sense instead of writing an agreement that we should just defer until it's built, and then the agreement doesn't matter.
Thank you. Could I follow up then with a question to perhaps Jay? So what would be the means that we would have to follow up to ensure that if there was such an agreement made, that it would be carried out?
Well, the committee has the power to attach it as a condition of approval, which is considered applicable law for the building official to implement, but it also has the powers to ensure that an agreement is entered into between the municipality and the developer, and that it can be registered on title. Based on my understanding of how we would do that, that would make it the same as a site plan agreement or a subdivision agreement, and is therefore enforceable with those powers that we have for enforcement of subdivision and site plan agreements. I'm not trying to defer to our member who has maybe some additional knowledge they can inform the committee, but I would suggest that in the negotiation for the agreement, we could ask for sufficient securities to ensure the developer complies with the agreement, make it worth his while, in other words. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that it's not in other words, it's not going to be easy working with this landowner. He has a history of not always complying with our bylaw, but he has showing a willingness to work with the town on this matter, and that there is definitely through this process more power for the town to ensure things happen in a timely way and in accordance with how this committee and the town wants to proceed, if you choose to approve it. So I'll just leave it.
Thank you. Was there a building permit given for the implement shed? And what was the stated purpose at that time?
Yeah, I could defer to our building official, but there was a permit that was intended to be used as an implement shed under the agricultural zone, which meant it could not be used to operate as a functional business. In other words, no washrooms, no offices, and the drawings that were amended to show that it was compliant with the agricultural zone. And if you want more detail, maybe Josh can help.
You want to add anything? Okay. So how is the property being used right now? I drove past and saw some activity going on there right now. Some trucks.
Yeah, there's certainly a question as to whether it's being used as a contractor's yard. I don't know enough about how active it is. I don't go there daily, but it could possibly be used currently as storage or activity for the contractor's business.
We'll go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Tessa, a contractor's yard, is that a permissible use as a home occupation in the agriculture? agricultural zone?
Yeah, so it is a little funny. The bylaw lists contractor's shop as one, but that's not a defined term in the bylaw, whereas a contractor's yard is a defined term. So I went with contractor's yard because I figured that's the defined term. We can kind of, and that's what I asked the applicant to say, okay, does a contractor's yard describe your building? Under the home industries for the list of uses that are considered a home industry, contractor's shop is what's put there, but it's not defined. So, I mean, the committee could have some, if they want to interpret that differently from a contractor's yard, you certainly could because it isn't a defined term, but I just chose to use the definition of a contractor's yard because in my mind, I didn't see a major difference between those two terms.
So if we were to grant permission to build the house or go ahead with the house and it would be a contractor's yard as a permissible use. And
yeah, I would say that a contractor's yard is considered an acceptable home industry. There's basically a number of industries that can be considered home industries, and in the bylaw it says contractor's shop. I take that interchangeably with contractor's yard.
So would there still be some minor variances that would have to be applied for in relation to the size of the property and how it
just that 560 square meter. So if the house is built and it could meet those tests as being secondary to the residential use and not change the residential character of the lot, which are two of the ones that they're seeking relief from today, it would only be the size of the home industry, which is going up from 100 to 560.
Thank you.
Councilor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So, what are our pathways to success from here? So, if we defer today, what does that mean for the current state of the business that's being run there? Question one.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to
No,
answer or do
no,
that.
I can wait.
So when I was there, when I did a site visit, there wasn't any kind of business being run. It was kind of a semi-constructed building, so I can't speak to what sort of activity is being done there. It was just kind of sitting there, and it was built. I can't speak to what the activity is. They couldn't legally operate as a home industry right now on that lot. So yeah, for that question. So they would just have to cease any operations existing.
So if we
there.
defer today, they have to cease operations on
If
that
there are
lot.
any ongoing, I can't say if there are or not.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Second question. So we have a neighbor that has considerable number of concerns. How do we find our way through that? How can we address his concerns? And is there a pathway to success for everyone as far as you're concerned?
I mean, I'm sure there is in terms of the concerns that a number of them are the same ones we have, and that it's not a home. We can't consider it a home industry at this point without the home there. Some of the other concerns raised in terms of like the size of the driveway are really kind of not within the scope of this. The town issues driveway and entrance permits, and so that can be dealt with through that process. I'd have to check with the town in terms of what's been done for the driveway and the width with that concern. In terms of the other concerns, in terms of the wetness of the lands and raising the septic, those are all building permit issues. Those wouldn't typically be addressed through a kind of planning process. That's just stuff that would be reviewed at the building permit stage. So that's typically not something that would kind of be circulated publicly. It would just, the due diligence is done through town staff for those types of issues. So I believe that the building permit would be able to address those adequately. In terms of just, general objection to it in this location, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a bad location for this use in the municipality, but I do think it needs to be evaluated as a home industry, and I don't think it can be evaluated as such currently.
Through your chairman, for Jay. So I'm trying to understand is obviously we've got someone who's made a significant investment on their property. So I see a couple of choices, right? We can go down the path of trying to rezone that property, which I'm not even sure if you can even do that. Do you think that this will fit in as a home business, or Do you see what I mean? And we're starting to. This looks like a pretty significant business I've driven by there. Will it ever fit the classification of a home business from your perspective?
Yes, I do. I think it does meet the classification, and I think it meets what we intended when we had allowed home industries in rural areas of the town. We expected them to be more the types of uses that may have an impact on residential neighborhoods, and so it was definitely our desire to have a contractor's yard in rural land. The scale of it is at 1,000 square feet or 100 square meters. That's where we felt it when we established the general provisions that was appropriate, and that this committee is in place to evaluate ones that are bigger. So in this case, they want a 560 square meter building. You're evaluating it whether it's important. In my view, it can be, because you've got a number of means to ensure that you can. I keep stressing it, but you have an ability to enter into an agreement with Mr. Getz to ensure that the house is built in a timely way, so that they're establishing their living quarters. You have the ability to enforce, say, landscaping provisions to ensure. So if Mr. Martins indicates the trees are not owned, well, we can compel the installation of more landscaping or fencing to ensure it gets screened. We can compel or at least not compel, it can be acknowledged in the agreement that the owner has to abide by the clauses in terms of the agreement. So in other words, we're making him put it in writing, and we can use cash securities to ensure that terms of the agreement get fulfilled and complied with as they are followed through. So I guess I'm making it longer. I think it can fit in this area. I do want to note that the land to the south that Barry's construction bought is designated light industrial employment land, so it could be, we fully expect with the Bruce Power MCR those lands to be occupied by industrial businesses in the near future. I just wanted to add that because I forgot to say it earlier.
Deputy Mayor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. The way I see it is it's a matter of the cart before the horse here. We've got the building before the house. We acknowledge that if the house is rectified and put on the property, we don't have an issue anymore. I also recognize Mr. Martin's concerns about landscaping issues and building issues, and as you just said, Jay, that if we get that in writing, I think that would be a great thing. I also think that if we get a monetary down payment as a way of securing the land itself to ensure that Mr. Getz is going to be building a house. He's told us he's entered into the drawings. He's very close to having it. But as long as he puts some money down to ensure that that is going to happen, as soon as the house is approved, we've kind of taken away what restrictions are put on it. So I think there's a couple pieces that if we put in there tonight, we can move this forward. It's only going to come back as soon as he puts the house on. It'll be right back to us, and we're in the same spot again. So I'd like to see a couple of the variance restrictions put into this agreement. I would like to see a monetary agreement put down that signifies Mr. Getz is indeed going to be building his residential home there, and I think that would be an easy one to move on forward with.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jay, what about the parking provision? If this is an acknowledged purpose to store construction vehicles, how does that work?
There'd be, to me, a couple provisions. One would be, I guess there's three choices, and it's not something that it'll be something I'll want to speak with Mr. Getz about, but one would be to revise the decision to allow for more vehicles. It's not my preferred. My preferred would be to keep it small scale and in the agreement and acknowledge and ensure that the number of vehicles are limited to 3 commercial vehicles plus the 2 business parking spaces, and that he'll have to find another location for those other vehicles that are, if they're necessary for the home occupation, either inside the building, in other words, out of sight, or on another location. And it will have to be a line that is acceptable to the town and to the developer if they want to proceed with this location. The third one would be to well, I said revise the number. I guess the third would be a variation on it. You sort of revise it and restrict it. Sort of you allow for, say, one more vehicle, but also, it's just a it's just a negotiated difference. That's all.
If I was to encapsulate, if the house, I've been listening to a number of the comments, and I also recognize the constituents' concerns about the adjacent property quite clearly. If the house is already built, we would be looking at we would be examining a number of variances, would we not?
The house is built, we would have come with basically a planning position on with, we agreed that the current building, if it's secondary, do we believe it is secondary to the principal use, which should be residential on this property, and does it not alter the residential or agricultural character of the lot? So those two we would have evaluated as part of that. At this time, I can't evaluate those two provisions of the home industry bylaw. I can't say if it impacts the residential character of the lot as it's not established, and I can't say that it's clearly secondary to the residential use, which is the other provision. I can't make a determination on those. So if a house was built, I might be able to. I could come and tell you yes or no. I believe that is. So we might not be looking for variances on those two provisions, or we might be. It would just depend on the evaluation of those two provisions. We would definitely still be looking at an increase of the size of the home industry, going up from 100 square meters to 560. That is not something that's subject to the house being built. That's just the general size of the use on the lot.
We have sufficient tools in order to address the concerns of the constituent, at the same time keeping in mind that the owner of the property has liberty to his property.
I mean, I think that's up for the committee to determine if they feel that way.
Mr. Legault.
Mr. Chair, I'd be in favor of deferring this, only because Mr. Getz says he's very close to having a plan, and I think if he could work out some arrangement with the town, commitment in sorts, and come back to us, it'd be much easier to deal with this application at that time.
Are you suggesting would you be comfortable with deferral if the town had a draft agreement for committee to look at, even if it's power of town council for those agreements to enter into those agreements, I should say?
I'd be comfortable to look at it if the town had an agreement, yes.
Mr. Glow, would you like to present a motion for that? If you could outline the provision as well. Rich.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So, Jay, you said this isn't your preferred way to go. What would you suggest?
I'd prefer that you have enough, essentially you have enough information now. You can make the decision to approve, in my recommendation, with the condition that says a house will be built and the town will ensure through an agreement that it gets built. I don't know what waiting would achieve, because we're going to come back with an agreement that says that.
Yes, sir. Come up here, please.
It appears that the committee has decided that this is going to be a contractor's yard. Provincial policy statements set out the permitted uses in prime agricultural areas. Further directions as provided by OMAFRA's guidelines to permitted uses in Ontario's prime agricultural areas Generally, uses such as a contractor's yards are not permitted to be located in prime agricultural areas as they are not considered to be agriculturally related. That's the provincial statute that we're going over. Secondly, in our own bylaw, bylaw 3.1.5, the location, as seen on your site map, no part of an accessory structure shall be located in front of any portion of the main building or structure. And the main building or structure on this property has to be the house. Yep. Yes, sir.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, what would an ideal resolution from your perspective be?
To have someone that follows the rules beforehand, doesn't put the cart before the horse. Because we're in a situation now where resolving this issue is going to be very difficult. Because the rules were broken. And the rules have been broken numerous times by this individual. As I stated, pulling out the culvert out of the front of his house, putting an agricultural building up that is clearly a contractor's shop, that has 2 offices in it and a washroom. That's what stopped everything, so we had to get a variance at this point.
So we know this has gone on before. So I'm just asking you what you would recommend as a solution to move forward. Would you have that building torn down, or what's your solution?
At this time, I would refuse to make comments because it's not my role to be telling people what to do with their property at this point. It's whoever allowed this to first start off should have been a little bit deeper in their investigation as to the uses of this land. And it is known, as I read, the town already is trying to leave another spot. He's moving from a place that is already residentially zoned, and he's got a home industry there that they're pissed off about. Excuse my language.
So I'm a person that tries to find a solution.
Yeah.
Right. So I oftentimes a solution is a compromise that has to be between the two parties, right? And if either party feels as though they've had a great success, usually it's a sign that the negotiation has failed. So what I'm trying to get from you, because you have obvious opposition, is to try and figure out what would be something that would make this palatable for you going forward.
Well, I haven't turned my mind to a train of resolution that would be acceptable to me, but I have made comments already about the distance from the highway that both the 2 in existence quarries are at, that are both bermed all around them for prevention of noise like that. Any future development, although it may only be a septic bed, I want to make sure that the water's not getting, that we have to look after that in a proper fashion. I believe that any additional work that he does that's beyond what is planned is put stop to right quickly, including tearing down and removal. Because if you go look at that property right now after you leave this room, you will see the clearing I've talked about. Take a look underneath the power lines, and he's already got an area there. That's going to be another storage area, I believe. I don't know, because I don't know. I'm not in the shoes of his mind.
Thank you. There are, just for the committees, there are 4 other permitted uses in this area, just so we know. Secondly, my comments is that we're allowed subjectivity as long as it's within the confines of the law. And so if you're examining the deferral. I have a motion moved by Mr. Legault and seconded by Councillor Rich, dated today, June the 17th, 2019, that we defer this application until the applicant has signed an agreement with the town of Saugeen Shores to build a home on the property. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Our next meeting date will be Monday, July the 15th, 2019. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Grace and seconded by Deputy Mayor Matheson, dated today, June the 17th, that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the Secretary Treasurer. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone.